Looking for a way to make more money? Feeling a bit stuck in your career? Not sure what to do next?
Do you have your MBA or are you thinking about getting one?
If so, then you don't want to miss this episode. This is Queer Money episode 536, and today we're talking with the executive director of Reaching Out MBA, Aidan Currie. Reaching Out MBA is a 501c3 with a mission to empower LGBTQ plus MBA students and professionals to become leaders in their careers and communities by connecting MBA students and alumni.
And get this, 90% of attendees at its annual conference known as ROMBA who are looking for employment get at least one interview with a corporate partner. And 50% of internship seekers receive one or more offers out of interviews they had at ROMBA or because of attending the ROMBA conference. Sounds like the odds are ever in your favor.
If that doesn't convince you that Reaching Out MBA is where you want to be, Aidan was at first a student member of Reaching Out MBA and then returned a few years later as an executive director. So let's hear what he says about how more LGBTQ folks can make more money and thrive financially.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC. Welcome, Aidan Currie from Reaching Out MBA to the Queer Money Podcast. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Excited to be here, guys. Nice to see you.
Of course. This has been a long time coming. Your organization reached out to our people about it, I guess about a year ago now, and invited us to come to your annual conference in Chicago. And we were honored to be able to attend and had such a fun time. The group that we spoke with, just such an engaged group of students. We weren't sure exactly how our message was going to be received, but there were people literally lined up to talk to us afterwards. And I think they had to kick us out of the room because they had to get ready for the next event or event.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a busy time. I mean, it's a 3-day event, but it flies by. So we were so happy to have you there. That was awesome. It was a nice addition for us. We really, especially with the increase of international students doing their MBA in American colleges, it's really interesting for them to get your insights on, how to set yourself up for success in terms of, funding your MBA and paying it off wisely once you're back in the workforce.
Yeah, of course. So one of the series that we're doing on the Queer Money Podcast is trying to encourage our listeners and viewers or inspire them with more ways to make money, more ways to make more money. And that's kind of what the angle we're going to go with today. Because with Reaching Out MBA and your annual ROMBA conference, it's a great opportunity for networking. So can you, in your words, can you elaborate for our listeners and viewers what the value of networking is, especially for those who are on similar career paths?
Yeah, sure. I think, we all know we took a big turn in 2020. I think about it now years ago, I'd be up every morning at 6 a.m. and shower and breakfast and put on a suit and commute almost an hour into the office and be in a boardroom presenting by 9 a.m. 5 days a week, of course. And it feels like that was a Herculean task now. I mean, we're living in such a different world, went from that within a matter of, weeks to obviously living in a pandemic. And I think, to a large extent, we haven't come back into being in the office culture has changed so much. And, I think really, well, at times it's nice to be able to roll out of bed and kind of be in your office to the detriment of a lot of, ability to network and to socialize and to even, let alone the productivity one has in being in an office with people, just kind of those more casual encounters. And I've been reflecting on that because some folks on our team are at the beginning of their career and actually their first jobs were, they started in the workforce during COVID or even after COVID. And so something that we do is what I like to call a quarterly business review. So bring everyone together for a 2-day staff meeting. We all travel to a different city once a quarter, we sit in a room, talk about everything we need to kind of, evolve the organization, obviously leave time for team building, but even just kind of on that micro level, it's really important for, people with the same goal, with a shared goal to get together and, kind of have that experience of being in the same room because, you build relationships in a very different way when you're in the same place, that you can't do when you're on Zoom. And really kind of looking at that more broadly in the context of reaching out in the ROMBA conference, again, it's 3 days of dozens of sessions, of networking events, receptions, and everyone there essentially, there are a couple main goals. The primary goal for most people is to find an internship or a job, when they're out of school. That's number one. I would say a close second is to find a partner, a spouse. MBAs, they do like to
That did not occur to me.
get together with other MBAs, kind of similar life goals. So there's that piece as well. And then more broadly, just building one's professional and personal, queer network. And so I think, especially in the times that we're living in right now, the value of getting together in person and just having conversations, whether that's in a structured manner, in an educational session, or in a panel, or when you're just kind of next to somebody in line getting some food and you strike up a conversation. Those can, be some of the most fruitful conversations one can have, right? You never know when lightning's going to strike and you're going to find inspiration to pivot your career, or somebody who's going to connect you to kind of your next employer. So just generally speaking, I am a huge advocate of getting out there. And what did Woody Allen say? Kind of success is 90% showing up, and I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I think that we have in some ways gotten conditioned because of the pandemic of not necessarily going outside of our circle, of our current circle, right? We aren't used to going to conferences. We aren't used to going to networking events. We aren't used to, and so for some of us, especially those of us who are a little bit more less inclined to be having those kinds of conversations. Maybe we're a little bit more introverted, or we find those kind of places difficult. We need to start breaking out of that again and getting back out there. Like you said, we never know when lightning will strike, and if we're not in those settings, we can oftentimes think of ourselves as being left out of, or maybe discriminated against, because we are seeing the effects of it, but we're not realizing that we actually might be the ones that in some ways may be causing some of that, because we're not putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It can be, not to be too doomsday, but I do feel like we're living in a more kind of isolated world at the moment. And there, of course, some very valid health concerns that, are existing, still today. But yeah, I think to your point, it's easier to kind of get inside your own head when you're not being around people, and having those new experiences. And I think, reaching out, the conference itself is it's a great time. It's very social. As I say, there's a lot of recruiting that happens there, but the reality is too that, people I think it's really at the top of most people's lists in terms of anxiety-inducing situations, is going into a room and networking with strangers, and really kind of putting yourself out there in a vulnerable space. And so, but I think at our event, the ROMBA conference that's happening this fall, by the way, in Los Angeles, September 28th to the 30th, what I experience every year and what I hear from so many people is just the overall kind of love and inclusion and welcoming nature of it. For a lot of people, especially those, kind of earlier in their career, or perhaps they're in their MBA, it's the first time where they are in a room of 1,000, kind of queer business professionals and MBA folks who have their MBAs. And it's an overwhelmingly positive, experience for them. It's a very supportive environment. Everyone, kind of wants to talk to everyone, and really they're there with the goal to support everyone in their own journey, wherever they might be, whether that's, somebody earlier in their career, as I say, or somebody who's perhaps further along, either looking for their next role or looking to learn about, what's in the mind of a 28-year-old MBA candidate today. So there's a lot of really kind of interesting intergenerational kind of, I think, opportunities to experience what other folks are going through.
Yeah, it's all great. I'm curious, is there a unique value to networking with other queer folks who are on similar career paths? And if so, what might some of that value be?
Yeah, absolutely. I work for a small LGBTQ plus nonprofit, so my gay job is my day job, and to an extent, I'm kind of living in that bubble, right? Because I'm speaking to members of the community every day, most all day, and so it's always an interesting reminder, going to one of our events where you meet a lot of people who perhaps are working in a more traditional field, and they might be the only, LGBTQ plus person, on their team or in their office. And so that's kind of why it's all the more important that we have these events and bring folks together, because LGBTQ plus people who are, let's make no mistake about it, we're living in very dangerous times and are still, to put it mildly, facing a lot of headwinds in this country. They need those opportunities to connect with other people in the community and kind of share their challenges and share their successes, and just kind of hear each other's perspectives and experiences. And I think that really fills people up, especially when they don't have access to a vibrant queer community, whether it be in their office or where they live. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of be building that community at that intersection of business and queerness.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because you are right. We kind of, David and I included, we kind of get stuck in our bubble because almost everything we do is for our LGBT business with other LGBT businesses or those who have wanted to partner with our LGBT business. So we're kind of insulated from some of the discrimination, at least the obvious discrimination that others might feel in the workplace on a day-to-day, in their day-to-day. And so there's just something unique about being able to go to an environment where you know that you're going to be unabashedly accepted by everybody who's there. And in that, you might find friends, you might find business opportunities, you might find your next job, or at the very least, you have connections so that those opportunities may materialize sometime down the road.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Yeah, we're somewhat in the same boat here, but it's a really powerful reminder to people like us who are kind of living in more of a queer world day to day, of the challenges that people are experiencing in different parts of the country. And so that always, it kind of fills up my cup in a different way, and that it kind of makes me more inspired to work harder, because sometimes it can be easy to kind of lapse into this thinking of, well, everyone around us is kind of accepting, and that's of course not the case.
Yeah. I think if you're like working in the entertainment industry in LA, it might seem like, oh, everybody's accepting of everybody. But if you're trying to work in the oil business in the middle of Texas, it might not be as affirming.
Yeah.
And even if you know that intellectually, right, we understand that that is the case. It's always good to have an opportunity just to talk to people who are going through, some greater challenges, and understand, what those look like today.
The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission. Yeah, and I think it was, we just looked at some data that came out of a study that, or survey that LinkedIn, and I'm going to forget the name of the other organization, they partnered to look at LGBTQ folks in the workplace. And the data that they shared was roughly 35% of folks are actually out at work, which is a drop since I know that we saw data a few years ago that said it was around 42%. So we're seeing people are feeling less and less comfortable being out in the workplace. And I think that one of the things that their study said is that more and more queer folks are feeling exhausted because of constantly having to code switch every single day when they
Right.
go into work, because they don't feel like they can bring their full selves to work, or they can't show up the way that they would want to show up, which I think that gives you the opportunity to show up in these kind of circumstances. You know, when you're out there with a room full of 1,000 other queer people, you can pretty much show up in almost any manner that you want, and know that, you know, not, I mean, obviously not everybody is going to love or appreciate everything that you bring to the table, but it doesn't, you aren't going to get the judgment that you maybe might get from some other organizations or
Yeah.
individuals that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a part of what reaching out brings to the table as well is, so I talked a little bit about recruiting before, but we have about 90 corporate partners that we work with every year. So, a lot of big consulting firms, finance firms, tech, healthcare, areas you would expect, MBAs are obviously going to be interested in working in post their degree. But it's a bit of a filter through which candidates can feel safe. Like, these are organizations that where it is going to be safe for me to show up authentically at work. We've been working with a lot of these partners for many, many years, and we have really strong relationships. And the fact that they are coming to these events year in, year out, and finding success, I think, is a testament to how they run their business. And so there's kind of a nice kind of virtuous cycle there. We also have a fellowship program with 65 business schools. So essentially, the business schools become part of the program. They select students to get a scholarship. And then we work with the fellows throughout their MBA career. We bring them together for an in-person retreat, and then various leadership programming throughout their time. But I've heard time in and time out from students, when they were considering an MBA, the only schools they considered were those in the ROMBA fellowship, because it was a really
Oh, wow.
strong signal, once again, that these were schools that were going to be very welcoming to the queer community.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? You've already kind of given them, these businesses, a stamp of approval, so it's one less
Mhm.
layer of homework that they have to do before they find themselves in an unwelcoming situation.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So uh, let's backtrack just a little bit. Our community is very, very highly educated. In what situations does it make sense for somebody to pursue their MBA?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question.
Because it's not necessarily for everybody, even if you are in
Correct.
business, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have the best answer to that question. What I can say, well, I'll back up maybe even a little bit further and talk a bit about our organization, Reaching Out MBA, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's actually been around for 25 years. So back in '99, a few business school students at Harvard and Yale were in their course, and realized, they looked around and thought, oh, there's all these really kind of interesting affinity groups for different people, but there was nothing for queer MBAs. So they got together, and the great leaders they were over the end of year holidays, decided to do something about that. And so in 2000 they started the first what is now essentially our annual conference, but gathering of LGBTQ MBA students. So I think there were about 150 people with packed lunches, in a classroom at Harvard. And we've kind of grown slowly but surely over the years. So we're still now the largest gathering of LGBTQ plus MBA students and alumni. We're just under 2,000 people right now. And as I say, our annual event takes place in the fall, and rotates to big cities throughout the country. This year we'll be in Los Angeles. And so a lot of what we have done historically is focus on current MBA students and supporting them through their MBA career, again, with education, the fellowship, recruiting opportunities, and an opportunity to build their network. We do some work on the prospective MBA side. We'll have our annual virtual conference on August 21st. And by the way, reachingoutmba.org, you'll be able to find everything you need at our website. So we'll usually have, a few hundred prospective MBAs. So this is maybe somebody who's thinking about starting next year or in a few years. all of our fellowship schools are present, and you just get an opportunity to, meet people who have recently gone through the process of getting their MBA, talk to admissions folks from the different schools. And so there's that piece. I'll talk a little bit later about PRISM, our new program, but that in a nutshell is kind of who we are as an organization and who we're serving. So getting back to your question about who should get an MBA, I think my advice would be, if you're thinking about getting an MBA, come to that prospective MBA day-long event. Again, it's virtual, so it's really easy to come in and to meet members of the community. And I think you'll get a really good sense there. A lot of stories from people who have taken the leap over the last few years. Again, you'll be able to talk to business school admissions folks, the staff as well. And that should give you some food for thought in terms of, kind of what are the advantages and potential pitfalls of entering into an MBA.
Nice, nice. I think you already touched on it a little bit, but can you kind of give us a rundown of, I mean, you have the annual ROMBA conference, the big conference every year that's going to be in LA this year. But you also have other events throughout the year, like you just touched on, for the aspiring MBAs, and there's a women's event, I think once or twice a year. Can you give us a rundown of what that looks like for folks?
Yeah, for sure. So we do have an Out Women in Business conference that takes place every spring. We have not decided where it's going to be next year, but that's an opportunity for women and people who identify as non-binary to come together. It's a one-day event with that's really kind of focused on networking and educational sessions. Through the summer, we do a TREX program, and that's for incoming MBA, so people who are starting their program in the fall. We do them in multiple cities across the country, usually with an industry focus. So for example, people interested in pursuing a career in finance, we do that in New York. It's a competitive process. We'll select 25 incoming MBAs. Everyone comes to New York, and over the course of 2 days, we'll visit anywhere between 6 and 8 corporate partners. And so it's an incredible opportunity for these folks who are not even started their program to get to meet people, understand the recruiting cycles, but I think most importantly, get a sense of like what a day in the life working at, all these different companies is like. And you'd be amazed at how powerful that can be. Some people fall in love with some companies. They might fall out of love with some companies, depending on what happens during the day. But it's just incredibly, it's a bit of a blitzkrieg. You get so much experience and firsthand kind of opportunity to meet people in a couple of days. And folks have said it's kind of more educational than, a whole kind of course in their first year of their MBA. So we have that, and then I've talked about the prospective MBA admissions summit in August, but our main event really is in late September, early October, the ROMBA conference I've mentioned. I'll talk a little bit about PRISM, which we're very excited about. We're launching it this year, and so as I mentioned, a lot of what we have done is working with current MBAs, but what has been very clear for a long time is that we have a very energetic post-MBA, more experienced kind of professional population, people who have gone through the program and have seen great results and have a lot of love for the organization and are very keen to, continue to stay engaged in it. And so we've come up with PRISM, which is really an initiative. And in this fall, it will manifest in the form of a 3-day conference that will run alongside ROMBA. And it's specifically for experienced LGBTQ plus professionals. So our target market is 2 to 7 years post MBA or equivalent. You do not have to have an MBA to be there. You don't even have to have a graduate degree. We're just looking kind of for people in that area of their career, that stage of their career. And there's going to be a completely separate educational component. We've got some incredible faculty who are going to be running executive education sessions, its own kind of networking piece, its own recruiting piece. Importantly, we've got 16 corporate partners who are going to be sending people who are specifically looking for experienced talent as opposed to MBA graduates. And yeah, we're really excited. PRISM is the name of the conference. See your career in a new light is the tagline, and I
Nice.
really think it's going to be wonderful. A lot of people are going to be seeing their career in a new light. I think a lot of people are looking to pivot in some way or another when they get to that stage in their career, and this is I think, really an untapped market and a great opportunity for people to come together again and kind of find their network and re-engage with the ROMBA community to find their next role, or to, kind of become more involved with the organization or the queer business community.
Fascinating. I love that.
I remember, so one of our colleagues, he does a lot of public speaking, and one of his activities that he does with a room, oftentimes when he's speaking to a room full of college students, about how do you connect, how do you network, or the power of networking. He takes a ball of yarn and he asks somebody who has a question that they or someone they're trying to connect with. So say, for example, somebody says, I'm trying to connect with a manager or somebody who's looking to hire somebody who is interested in whatever industry it is. And
Mm.
they take the ball of yarn, and then he asks the whole audience, who knows somebody who could help this person? And when somebody stands up and raises their hand, that ball of yarn is then thrown while one person
Mm.
hangs on to the end of the yarn. So this continues. The person who gets the ball of yarn then says, I'm trying to connect with somebody in this field. And so pretty soon you see this room that has this yarn all strewn all over
Gets
the
messy.
place, but it really shows the power of, even in a small group of people of 100 or less, there is this network of individuals who have access to they may not be the person that you need, but they have access to the people that you need or are looking to connect with. And I think that that's, when you talk about all of these different types of events that you have throughout the year, there are so many opportunities for you to connect with somebody that they may be the person, they may not be the person that you're looking for, but they may know the person that you're looking for. And so I think that's the power of attending these kinds of events. Or if you really want to progress your career and you want to connect with other people who are 100% supportive of you as a queer individual, it's these kinds of spaces that can make, I don't want to say make or break, but can make or empower your career much further than you ever expected it to be the case. And I think that's why these kinds of events exist. It's great that we have something like this dedicated to the queer community, because I do see, like you said, with the founders, I see these kinds of events and these kinds of activities happening all over the place with different organizations or different affinity groups. And we as a community need to tap into those networks. We need to tap into our own network, because we are consistently talking about how we're not making enough money to keep up with the cost of living, or we're not making enough money to be able to live in the cities we want to live in, or we're not making enough money to have the kind of retirement that we want to have. One of the
Mm.
ways that we get to those places of keeping up with the cost of living, having the living in the city that we want to, or having the fabulous retirement that we want, is by progressing our careers.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's not cheap, so that's for sure. But no, that's I'm happy that you shared that story with the yarn. I think that's really powerful. We do something similar, a slightly different format, but it's incredible, like what comes out of the woodwork when you really kind of give permission to people to ask for things like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. A couple of things to share. First of all, just kind of my own story. When I was doing my MBA at NYU Stern, gosh, it would have been back in 2010, I think. And I just happened to talk to an acquaintance in the hall one day, and they said, "Oh, well, have you heard about this kind of ROMBA conference? It's out in LA this year," and explained a little bit about it. So I went home, and I'd never heard of it. Logged on, checked it out online, and I was like, this kind of sounds interesting. I don't know. I'm in New York. It's LA. It's kind of a far, track. But you know what? let's go for it. Let's figure it out. And so I went and was, so impressed with it, the substance of it educationally, but also the style of it. It was a lot of fun. And I just kind of became enamored. And so when I graduated, I I bugged my new employer until they let me go as a corporate partner. Kind of, wore them down.
There's a story
And
there. Why did you have to laugh before you told us that?
well, I didn't want to be too unkind about my employer, which yeah, I got a lot of no's before I got to yes, let's say that. And so I got to go back a couple of years later, and lo and behold, then I became the executive director. So I often think,
Nice.
well, if I hadn't spoken to that person in the hall, or if I'd said, oh, it's kind of, I don't have the time to go out to LA, certainly, most certainly would not be sitting here speaking with you today. So, you never know. And then just to the power of us being in person again. We, of course, like everyone did, all of our events virtually for a couple of years. And then, shortly after we felt it was safe to go back outside, it very intentionally shut down the virtual component, especially of the conference. We still do some virtual programming, but it felt like a bit of a lose-lose proposition. Nobody was really enjoying themselves. I think it might have it lowered kind of the barriers and perhaps gave some people permission to think, oh, I don't have to go all the way across the country. I can just do this from my kitchen table. But the results were kind of not good for anyone. And so we kind of put a stake in the ground and said, this is all about being in person and that kind of connection. And we haven't looked back.
Yeah. Nice. That's great. So a question we wanted to ask you, because it's come up a couple of times from our listeners and viewers, especially since the pandemic, that you might be privy to some more intelligent responses than what we have in our heads, is if somebody's feeling stuck in their career, whether they're in the industry that they want to remain in or they want to transition to another industry, what suggestions do you have to kind of like break through that stuckedness?
Yeah, great. Well, so we actually have a few sessions specifically at our conference. That is a very kind of common question we get, or a common situation for a lot of people. So we have a session on, how to, pivot as you're going into your MBA, also as you're kind of leaving your MBA. We have a session for non-traditional paths through. And so there's an opportunity to hear from a lot of people who have been successful at doing that pivot. And I think, even beyond a professional conference, I'm just a big believer in trying new things and getting out there. And again, you never know where kind of the dots are going to connect. So it could be trying a new hobby. It could be just like anything that kind of makes your mind think in a different way. It might be meeting somebody who has like the experience and you connect and they can get you to the right person, but it also could be just something really internal, right? Like you could meet somebody and have a conversation that is not at all related to careers, but it just makes you start thinking, it makes you realize something different or think about something differently. So I don't know, I'm only one person, but in my mind, it's all about kind of like the stimulus of always changing things up and seeing new things. And I just feel like, it's kind of, you never know where that's going to take you. You kind of had unlimited possibilities in that sense. Because I think also if you're stuck a little bit and you don't know where to go, again, it can be easy to kind of, for that feeling to compound if you're not getting out in the world. And so simply just getting out and, meeting as many people as you can. I mean, this is far from any kind of groundbreaking advice, but just go to as many networking events or, again, even, personal events, parties, whatnot. You just never know who you're going to meet and where that's going to go. And it's also just very kind of stimulating in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that you could kind of bring up a good point for those of us who may be feeling stuck or maybe feeling like we're languishing in our career. Sometimes it's talking to somebody who is really inspiring, or is very passionate about what they're doing. Maybe it's not maybe what they're doing is not the exact same thing that you would do, but getting that inspiration or that spark, talking with somebody who has that kind of passion might remind you of why are in the career path that you've chosen, or what was it that was originally inspiring to you and why you went down that path. It can maybe reignite that fire for you to have that passion again, whether it's with your current employer or maybe with a different one.
Absolutely. I mean, that always pays great dividends, being able to hear from people who are truly inspiring and doing what they love, and just, kind of have command over, their own kind of destiny is always, I think, a very healthy thing to be able to witness.
Yeah.
I love that. This has been very insightful, and I think it's going to resonate really great with our audience. A question that we've been asking a lot of our interviewees for the last couple of months, since the general anxiety of the population is pretty high, especially for the LGBTQ plus community. So what is one thing that has you feeling positive or good these days, related to or unrelated to what we've just talked about?
So I recently joined a pool club, I guess you could call it, or an associate. I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's a pool club. So billiards. I'm talking on a Monday night at a local kind of restaurant bar. Well, it's really more of a bar than a restaurant. But they have really nice tables. I would go every once in a while, and they had a sign-up sheet. And I thought, yeah, this is just gonna, introduce me to a different world. And sure enough, yeah, we meet on Monday night. I don't believe there are any LGBTQ folks really involved, and so it's just like a departure. I've met so many interesting people, and people that I frankly probably would not have usually met through work, or perhaps even through my friend network. And so yeah, it's just a great way to get out for a couple hours and kind of turn your brain to a different channel.
Yeah, I love that. Were you good at pool before, or are you just kind of
I was okay.
building
Yeah,
that skill?
I was decent enough, but I've definitely learned a lot. There are some people who are, of course, very serious about it, so I really upped my defensive shots. Yeah,
There always are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. I mean, talking your advice right there was just to put yourself out there and try new things, and here you are applying that to your own life. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. How can our listeners connect with, or viewers connect with, all things ROMBA and Reaching Out MBA?
Yeah, sure. So again, our website is reachingoutmba.org. You'll find everything you need to know there about all of our events, including the upcoming ROMBA and PRISM conferences in LA. They'll be taking place actually the end of September, so the 26th to the 29th. They overlap for a couple days each there. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Aidan Currie, Executive Director of Reaching Out MBA. And of course, people who are much more savvy on the social side are always pushing out stuff on all of our social channels.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing a little bit about everything that Reaching Out MBA does. It's a
Yeah,
great
my
service
pleasure,
for the
guys.
community.
Thanks so much for having me.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
Thank you, Aidan, for a great interview and for sharing all the fantastic work Reaching Out MBA is doing to help queer folks make more money. To our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us for another episode. Get your Queer Money takeaway and resources mentioned in this episode from this week's newsletter.
Then join us this Thursday for another bonus episode, and next Tuesday when we talk with money expert Jackie Lamb about how to break the habit of financial phoning. And if you don't know what it is, you probably got it. Thank you and have a great week.